The evacuation order came through at a 340, and a 14. Every other person on the survey team had packed a bag and walked to the shuttle. I watched the lights of the lifter shrink into the gray pre-dawn sky above the plateau, and felt, for the first time in 3 years on this planet, completely alone. I did not follow them. My name is Maravos. Was a junior geological survey technician, 3rd tier, attached to the Colonial Survey Division's Outer Reach program. My job was to drill core samples, log mineral density readings, file reports that no one read until someone upstream needed a number to justify a budget line. I was good at the job, was very good at being invisible inside it. The reason for the evacuation was the chamber. 3 years we had been working the plateau. 3 years. The sealed excavation site, at its center, had resisted every instrument we brought to bear. Ground-penetrating radar returned noise. Atmospheric sensors read the air inside as inert, which was impossible. Nothing sealed for that long has inert air. And the monolith itself, the great obsidian column standing 12 meters high at the chamber's heart, gave off no heat signature, no electromagnetic field, no acoustic resonance. It was, according to every device we owned, not there. An absence in the shape of stone. The senior geologist called it a dead site and filed for closure on the 2nd anniversary. Division overruled him, sent us back for a 3rd season. Then, 4 days ago, one of the junior drillers touched the base of the monolith with a gloved hand. Not a sensor, not an instrument, just a hand. And the plateau shook, not violently, more like a long, low exhale, like something very large turning over in sleep. Division's response was immediate. Hazard classification, full evacuation, no personnel within 5 kilometers of the site. They cited an unstable subsurface cavity. They cited seismic risk. They cited 17 regulations I had memorized in my first week on the job. They had not cited the truth, which was that they were afraid. I had not gone because my core sample log was incomplete, and because I have never once in my life been good at walking away from an unfinished thing. That is the honest answer. There was no heroism in it. I sat in the survey tent with my data tablet, finished the log entry for sample 7 gamma, and told myself I would leave before sunrise. The sun rose while I was telling myself that. By the time I walked to the chamber entrance, a cut stone archway that the first survey team had actually cleared 5 years before we arrived. The plateau was bright and cold and absolutely still. The wind that normally moved across the open rock was gone. The air tasted like it does just before a storm. That charged metallic sharpness. The sky above was clear. I told myself I was going to take one final atmospheric reading, just a data point. Professional closure. I stepped through the archway. The chamber was roughly circular, 40 meters across, up into the sky through a jagged breach in the ceiling that let in a column of pale morning light. That light fell directly on the monolith. 3 years of proximity had not prepared me for how the monolith looked under direct sun rather than our portable work lights. The obsidian surface was not uniform. It was carved, densely, intricately, in a script that our linguists had declared unrelated to any cataloged language. And the carving ran from the base to the apex in continuous, unbroken lines, as though the entire column were one long sentence spoken in a language the stone had not finished saying. I raised the atmospheric sensor. It returned the same reading it always had, inert. I lowered the sensor. I do not know why I took off my glove. Protocols are clear. No skin contact with uncharacterized alien surfaces. I have read those protocols. I wrote the site safety briefing that referenced them. I took my glove off anyway, and I pressed my palm flat against the carved face of the stone. It was warm, not the ambient warmth of sun-heated rock. Warm from inside, warm the way a living thing is warm. First line of carving lit beneath my hand. A deep violet, the color of the sky at the absolute edge of atmosphere, running along the glyph nearest my palm. Then the next line, then the next. The light moved upward from my hand, toward the apex like water climbing a wick, slow and certain, and the stone did not vibrate or crack or shudder. It simply became more itself, more present, as though the absence of signal that every instrument had recorded for 3 years had not been silence, but held breath. I should have stepped back, stood still. By the time the light reached the apex, the entire column was glowing, violet at the carved lines, the obsidian between them gone dark and mirror bright, and the column's glow reflecting off the chamber walls, and back at me from 100 angled surfaces. I was standing in a room made of violet light. A sound came from the stone. Not from a speaker, not from a mechanism. From the stone itself, the way resonance comes from the body of an instrument. Low, unhurried, entirely without threat, it said. Last Warden of the closed world. 6 words. Unhurried. In a language I'd never studied and understood completely. I did not move. I am not sure I breathed. The phrase hung in the lit air of the chamber and settled into me the way a truth settles. Not as new information, but as something you have always carried and finally been allowed to name. The column spoke again, and this time it took longer, and what it said was not a title but an accounting. It told me, and I understood every syllable, though I could not have told you by what mechanism, that this world had not been abandoned. It had been locked. Sealed by its last keepers at the moment of a catastrophe so complete that the only act of preservation left to them was to hide, remained. To hide it in stone that would not answer instruments. To hide it in silence that would resist every frequency a stranger brought to bear, and to wait. It told me the lock was biological. It told me the wardens, the bloodline of those final keepers, had not remained on this world, had scattered, and that the scattering had been intentional, and that the monolith had been waiting for one of them to find their way back. Not because it had searched. Because the lock was written in the blood, and the blood always finds the door it was made to open. I had spent 3 years drilling rock on a planet I thought was dead. I had been, without knowing it, coming home. The column's light deepened, not brighter, but more resolved, the way a photograph develops from suggestion into certainty. And from the carved surface a faint impression emerged at eye level. A handprint, mine still glowing where I had pressed it to the stone. Not carved, grown. The stone had accepted the shape of my hand and kept it. I pulled my hand back slowly. The print remained. The light remained. The violet glow of the chamber held. I stood there for a long time. A junior survey technician with an incomplete core sample log and a data tablet was no longer going to need. And I looked at the print my hand had left in the living face of a 12-meter column of alien obsidian that had been waiting for me, for someone with my blood, my specific combination of inherited biological markers that no instrument had ever thought to measure, for longer than any written record in the Colonial Survey Division's archive could reach. Division would come back. They would come with sealed suits and authorization codes and very serious people with very serious clearance levels. They would file declarations of jurisdiction and the flag site for military assessment, and hold briefings in rooms I would not be invited to enter. None of that would change what the stone had said. None of that would change the handprint still glowing in the obsidian. None of that would change what I now knew about where I came from and why a world that had looked dead for a century of recorded survey history had refused to stay dead the moment I put my bare hand on the door. I picked up my data tablet. I recorded the atmospheric reading, still inert, by every metric the sensor could measure, because the stone was not interested in being measured. I logged the time. I logged the temperature of the surface, which read as ambient. I logged the light. I logged the words. Then I sat down on the chamber floor with my back against the base of the column, in the violet warmth of a world that had been waiting for me. I let the sun climb the sky above the breed in the ceiling, and I stayed exactly where I was. The closed world had been waiting for its last warden for a very long time. I was not about to make it wait any longer.